Chapter 1 whispers beneath the dust of Korobanthy. Voice awakens, not in light, not in warmth, but beneath the breathless hush of a forgotten tomb, where dust is older than stars, and silence stretches beyond time. It does not remember its name, it does not remember its face. It only remembers pain and purpose. Buried in the blood-red sands of Korriban, where twin suns weep crimson light upon jagged stones, the voice stirs like a dream, half remembered, and begins again the telling dot. It speaks not to teach, but to warn. It remembers the first shadows. Not the Jedi, no, not yet. But those who walked before them, before the Order had walls, before the Temple had stone, before the Force had names. The voice was once among them, or perhaps it only watched. Memory is smoke now. Still, it speaks of a wall long buried, the 100-year darkness, when Jedi became heretic, and heretic became exile. They had sought power not for corruption, but for truth, for understanding, for healing and domination. They touched the forbidden arts, the bending of life, the shaping of flesh, the will to preserve self beyond death. The Order called it blasphemy. The galaxy called it treason, but they called it clarity. When the war ended, the victors cast the vanquished into the unknown. Dozens of Jedi, now something else, were flung into the uncharted void. They did not die. The Force would not permit it, for they had seen its second face, its darker path, its deeper hunger. They drifted, they suffered, they survived, and when they came upon the red world, the world of grave dust and bones, they knew it was not by chance. Korriban, a planet already steeped in sorrow, its native people, the Sith species, proud and violent and steeped in the dark. Energies that bled from their dying sun, the exiled Jedi came like gods clad in fire. With knowledge older than war, with weapons forged in the minds of a fallen order, they conquered not with armies, but with fear. The Sith knelt, they called the exiles lords, and the lords called themselves eternal. The first Sith Empire was born not with the scream of battle, but with the silence of memory. The blood of the Jedi mingled with the blood of Sith, and from this union came something new, something unclean, something powerful. The voice in the tomb remembers a Jedi. Paul, first among the fallen, first to wear the name Darth, though he did not speak it. He wielded a blade that hummed with ancient poison, its crystal torn from the heart of a dying star. He spoke gently and killed without hatred. But it was he who taught the rule of the strong, that weakness must be pruned, that pain is the path, that peace is a lie. His tomb still breathes beneath the sands, cold even in fire, guarded by statues that weep dust and watch without eyes. The Empire grew, slowly, then suddenly. Temples rose like fangs from the stone. Holocrons were carved from bone and bound with blood. The Force was no longer a song, it was a storm. It did not guide, it obeyed, and it punished. The Jedi believed the darkness ended with exile. They were wrong, for the darkness had only learned to wait. The holocron pulses now, as if remembering, hurts it, as if memory itself is agony. The voice lowers, softer than ash in wind, and speaks of wars forgotten by even the Force itself. Sith lords whose names are now curses, rituals performed beneath eclipsed suns, flesh turned to crystal, souls devoured in screams that echoed through hyperspace. Whole planets broken not by weapons, but by will. The Jedi never knew. They built temples of stone, but the Sith built theirs from fear. While the Republic dreamed of order, The Sith Empire became a wound in the galaxy's side, deepening, infecting, learning, and as the centuries passed, the dark became patient. The voice stirs. It remembers a figure standing among the tombs, a figure not yet born in this chapter, but already written in the dust. Revan, not yet a name, not yet a shadow, but the Force had already begun whispering of him, a dreamer, a warrior, a heretic, one who would walk both paths and leave behind only ruin. The sands shift, the tombs breathe, the stones murmur in sleep. Revan dreams in silence, and the Empire, long dead, begins to stir again. But the voice pauses, for even memory must breathe. This is not the beginning. The beginning is too far gone, buried beneath galaxies lost to time and echoes too faint to find. This is merely the place where the dark learned to survive, where it learned to whisper, where it learned to become prophecy. And as the holocron pulses once more, glowing faintly in the dark, the voice sighs with something like dread or longing, for the tomb is not sealed, and the dust does not forget, and Revan's dream is only beginning. Chapter 2. The wound that devoured the stars. The ancient voice stirs again beneath the cold weight of history, drawing breath from the shadows cast by dying stars. It recalls a time when the galaxy itself seemed whole, a fragile weave of light and dark still balanced by naive hope. But within that delicate fabric was a wound, unseen, festering, waiting. The exiled Sith Lords, cast from the Order's embrace, reached beyond mere exile. They reached into the void between the stars, and uncovered the forgotten secrets of the Rakata, a species whose mastery of the dark Force had once forged the infinite empire. Their power was absolute, wielded with ruthless precision, a symphony of destruction played upon the strings of life and death. From these forbidden arts, the Sith Lords drank deeply. They learned to twist flesh and spirit, to bend the Force into weapons that shattered worlds. The blood of Sith and Rocketon alike mingled in alchemy dark and unholy, crafting a lineage corrupted by power and desire. The voice murmurs of Sith, alchemists who sacrifice their humanity, melding flesh with machine, binding souls in torment beneath the twin moons of Korriban. The red sands drank deep of blood and sorrow, as the Sith forged their temples not of stone alone, but of pain and fear. Each tower a monument to suffering, each chamber echoing with the screams of the fallen. The rule of the strong was no mere law. It was the heartbeat of the Empire, pounding with merciless intent. The galaxy beyond trembled unknowingly. Republic. Worlds shone brightly like distant candles in the night, unaware that the shadows had begun to stretch. The voice laments the blindness of the Jedi, who sang songs of peace while the Sith embroidered their dark designs beneath the very fabric of the cosmos. The wound spread, subtle and insidious. Sith agents slipped like shadows through Republic space, poisoning allies, igniting rebellions, seeding distrust among friends. Whole systems turned to ash as ancient Sith warships, fueled by dark energies, carved paths of ruin through hyperspace lanes. And yet, despite this hunger, the Sith never rushed. They were patient as the grave. Each conquest, each sacrifice, each broken world fed the wound deeper, turning it into a festering scar upon the face of the galaxy. The Sith Lords taught their followers that strength was born from pain, that only through suffering could the true nature of the Force be revealed. It was not conquest alone that marked this age. It was transformation. The Sith were no longer merely exiles or outcasts. They had become a force unto themselves, a blight upon the Force, a corruption that seeped into its core. The very fabric of existence trembled under their touch. The voice's whisper grows faint, burdened by the weight of forgotten horrors. It speaks of rituals performed beneath eclipsed suns, where flesh and spirit were shattered and reforged in agony. It speaks of Sith who transcended death, becoming echoes trapped forever in ancient tombs, their souls bound by chains of hatred. And amid this darkness, the ancient temples grew, carved into the bones of dead worlds. Holocrons of forbidden knowledge multiplied, their whispers weaving lies and truths into an endless tapestry of deceit. The Sith became masters of illusion, shadows within shadows, hiding their true power behind masks of fear and legend. But even as the Sith Empire thrived in silence, the galaxy beyond remained ignorant. The Republic's light was dim, flickering against the vast night. The Jedi Council believed the Sith to be a tale of old, a nightmare of the past, long since vanquished. Yet the wound remained. It was hungry. It was patient. The voice falls into a hush, as if listening to the slow pulse of the galaxy's heartbeat, slow and faint beneath the stars. It knows what is coming. It whispers a name, unspoken, yet felt. A shadow, yet unborn. Revan and Az. The stars bleed distant light. The wound in the Force deepens, awaiting the dawn when all will burn. Chapter 3. The Red Crown of Marka Ragnos, beneath the bloodied skies of Korriban. Where the wind carries whispers of forgotten pain, the ancient voice stirs once more. It speaks with the weight of centuries, heavy as stone, slow as the turning of dead worlds. The red crown rests now upon the brow of Marka Ragnos, the last and greatest of the ancient Sith Lords, whose name is a prayer and a curse whispered. Across the void, Marka Ragnos was not born of mortal light. He was forged in the endless night that followed the 100-year darkness, a living shadow crowned by the whispers of the dark side itself. His presence warped the Force around him, bending time and space like the slow, inevitable decay of a dying star. The voice recalls the deep hunger in his gaze, an empire not merely ruled but consumed by his will. For centuries, Marka Ragnos held dominion over the Sith Empire, seated upon the Iron Throne, carved from the bones of fallen enemies and the shattered hopes of 1,000 worlds. His rule was law, written in blood and fear. Under his reign, the Sith knew power without challenge, an age of dark glory stretching across the red deserts and shattered tombs. But power, the voice intones with a whisper colder than death, breeds only shadow. The peace beneath Marka Ragnos's crown was a fragile illusion, a pause before the storm. For within his empire simmered envy, ambition, and hidden malice, planted in silence by two Sith Lords whose names would echo through eternity, Naga Sadow and Ludo Kresh. These two lords, both brilliant and merciless, coveted the throne. Their rivalry was not merely political, but cosmic, a war of dark philosophies. Naga Sadow, the visionary, sought conquest beyond the known galaxy, dreaming of war that would burn stars and bend empires. Ludo Kresh, the pragmatist, wished to consolidate the empire, to rule with iron discipline and merciless order. The voice describes their bitter enmity as a slow poison, creeping into the veins of the Sith. When Marka Ragnos's death came silent as the grave and sudden as a blackened comet, the empire trembled. The throne, empty but for the scent of blood, became a crucible for the greatest war the Sith had yet known. The holocron remembers the fury unleashed, the ancient warlords rallying legions of shadows, their armies blazing across the red sands and into the void. This was the great hyperspace war, the first true clash of Sith and Republic. Naga Sadow unleashed his terrible will, summoning starships that burned with unnatural light and weapons that shattered worlds with arcane energy. The Republic, naive and unprepared, was ravaged by this invasion. Jedi Knights fell in flames, their light extinguished in the dark tide. The voice is mournful now, a low chant beneath the stars, lamenting the countless lives consumed by ambition's fire. It tells of worlds broken, civilizations shattered, and the galaxy's fragile balance shattered beneath the weight of Sith pride. But the war was not merely a conflict of armors, it was a war for the very soul of the Force, a tearing of the fabric of reality. Yet, even in victory, the Sith were not whole. The Empire fractured. Naga Sadow's triumph was short-lived. The Jedi rallied. The Sith fleet was shattered, and the survivors scattered into the shadows beyond the galaxy's edge. The voice speaks of exile, once more a bitter inheritance. Carried in silence, Marka Ragnos's crown lay bloodied but unclaimed, a symbol of power lost in dreams, turned to ash. The holocron pulses faintly, echoing the sorrow of an empire broken but not defeated. The Sith learned that their strength lay not in conquest alone, but in survival, the patient weaving of darkness through time and memory. And so the ancient voice whispers, the Sith Empire that once ruled the stars was undone, yet from its ruin rose a deeper shadow, a shadow that waits beyond the edges of light and hope, whispering promises of fire and dominion. And in that waiting, a new name begins to stir, one that will carry the legacy of Marka Ragnos and all the darkness before him into a galaxy yet unmade. The voice fades, like a dying ember beneath the dust, leaving only the chill of anticipation. For the story is far from over, and the Red Crown's shadow lingers still. Chapter 4. The Fall of Ziost. The scattering of shadows, the voice rises from the depths of a forgotten holocron, resonating slowly beneath the cold stones of Ziost, the ancient capital of the Sith Empire, a world of endless twilight and icy graves. It is a world suspended between life and death, where shadows do not flee from light, but embrace it as kin. Here the Empire held its heart, and here it met its slow, terrible decay. Ziost was once a beacon of Sith power, a bastion forged from obsidian and bone, its spires piercing the heavy clouds like blackened daggers aimed at the starless sky. The air was thick with the weight of centuries, soaked in the blood of sacrifice, and humming with the tortured whispers of those who had been consumed by the dark side. The temples here were more than mere stone. They were vessels of ancient malice, where Sith Lords communed with forces older than time itself, binding their souls to shadows that promised immortality but delivered madness. But the strength of the Sith Empire was always a fragile veneer, stretched thin over ancient wounds and festering rivalries. The voice remembers the growing fractures that had long festered beneath the iron rule of the Dark Lords. The rule of the strong demanded obedience, yet ambition is a poison that no throne can contain. The Sith were locked in endless cycles of betrayal, their loyalty as shifting as the deserts of Korriban. The wheel of power turned relentlessly, grinding bones and crushing spirits beneath its merciless weight. Beyond the palace walls, the galaxy itself shifted, the Republic bruised, but unbroken from the great hyperspace war, began to heal and rebuild. The Jedi Order, guardians of light and balance, grew in strength, their eyes ever watchful for the faintest trace of Sith corruption. Yet the darkness was patient. It waited in silence and shadow, gathering strength beyond the outer rim. Then Came the hour of Zeost's reckoning. The holocron's voice falters as it recounts the betrayal that shattered the Empire's heart. The Sith Emperor, an unseen hand, a spectral presence, moved his pieces with cold precision. Secret rebellions stirred within the Empire's core, and ancient Sith lords who had long languished in exile conspired to reclaim their power. The simmering tensions erupted into a war more brutal than any before, war that would forever scar the galaxy and rend the Sith Empire asunder. The skies of Zeost burned with unnatural fire as warships tore through the atmosphere, spewing plasma and destruction. The Empire's armies, once vast and disciplined, were fractured and leaderless, torn apart by internal strife and external assault. The voice mourns the countless souls lost, their screams swallowed by the eternal night of the planet. In the chaos, the imperial capital fell. The great temples were desecrated, their spires crumbled to ash. The sacred holocrons, repositories of Sith knowledge and power, were scattered, lost to time and memory. The empire that had ruled for centuries was no more than a shattered husk, its remnants fleeing into the dark void beyond known space. From this devastation, the true horror took root. The survivors, broken and desperate, fled beyond the galaxy's edge into the uncharted shadows of the unknown regions. There they found refuge among the stars, but at a terrible cost. The exiles were no longer Sith of power and glory, they became ghosts, shadows clinging to the remnants of an empire that only lived in whispered legend. The voice speaks now of the silence that followed the scattering of shadows that hid in the dark places between stars. It tells of secret enclaves, hidden fortresses, and ancient rituals performed beneath cold moons where the Force itself seemed to shudder. These remnants nurtured the dark side in secret, weaving plots and alliances, waiting for the day when the Sith would rise again, and through it all, the holocron whispers a name. Not yet a lord, not yet a legend, but a spark in the darkness. Revan, a child of war and prophecy, whose fate is bound to the broken legacy of Zeost. The voice slows, heavy with dread and longing, as it warns that the fall of Zeost was not an end, but a beginning. The Empire's ashes are scattered across the void, but the darkness remains, patient, eternal, and hungry. The chapter closes not with finality, but with a breath held in shadow, a promise that from the ruins a new darkness will rise to engulf the stars once more. Chapter 5, Revan. The Jedi who listened too closely in the silent echoes of a galaxy torn by war and shadow. The voice stirs once again. It speaks from the depths of forgotten holocrons, from tombs unmarked and memories, long buried beneath ash and sorrow. The voice carries a tone heavy with prophecy and dread, as it begins to tell of one who was not born of darkness, but who walked willingly into its embrace. Revan, the Jedi who listened too closely. He was born in an age when the Jedi Order still held sway, though its light was already dimming beneath the growing shadow of conflict. A child of prophecy, his fate whispered in the corridors of the Jedi Temple, spoken in half-remembered dreams and uneasy visions. Yet Revan was not like the others. He was restless, a spirit yearning to pierce the veil beyond the light. He listened to the Force with a hunger that frightened his masters, for his curiosity was boundless, and his will unyielding. The voice remembers how Revan's footsteps echoed through the ancient halls, his eyes reflecting stars unseen by others, his mind drawn to secrets the Jedi dared not explore. His peers called him prodigy, but the elders whispered of danger. For Revan heard the voice of the Force, differently sometimes a whisper. Sometimes aurorand in those voices were the temptations of knowledge forbidden, truths veiled in shadow. It was the Mandalorian wars that forged the crucible of his destiny. The Mandalorians, fierce warriors unbound by the Jedi or Republic, surged across the Outer Rim like a storm of blood and fire. The Jedi Council, bound by their codes and fears, refused to intervene, leaving the galaxy to bleed. But Revan, guided by a vision that none else saw, stepped beyond the boundaries of order and law. He led a ragged army into war that shattered peace and order. The voice mourns the burning worlds, the fallen heroes, and the cries of the innocent drowned. Beneath the thunder of war, Revan became not merely a warrior, but a symbol of defiance, a beacon for those who believed that the Jedi's hands were tied by dogma and fear. Yet, in this defiance lay the first fracture of his soul. The holocron recalls how Revan's mind reached beyond the battlefield, seeking answers in the dark corners of the galaxy. He studied the ancient Sith, their lost histories, and their forbidden rituals. His heart became a battleground where light and shadow wrestled, where loyalty clashed with ambition. The line between Jedi and Sith blurred with every choice, every sacrifice made in the name of victory. The voice is slow, deliberate, as it recounts. The moment Revan donned the mask, not just of a warrior, but of a dark lord. It was a mask forged in fire and shadow, a symbol of transformation. The Mandalorian wars had ended, but Revan's war was only beginning. For in his quest to save the galaxy, he had become what he once fought against. His closest companion, Malak, followed him into darkness, their bond forged in blood and betrayal. Together, they ignited a new war, the Jedi Civil War, conflict that would tear the Republic apart and summon horrors long thought dead. The voice lingers on the destruction wrought, the lives shattered, and the Force wounded yet again by ambition and pride. But even as Revan embraced the dark side, the holocron whispers of a deeper truth, that he was not fully lost. There was a flicker of the light still burning within, a spark of hope that would not be easily extinguished. It is this duality, the balance of light and shadow, that makes Revan a figure both tragic and eternal. The voice softens, weaving a tapestry of prophecy and warning. Revan's journey is not merely one of war, but of destiny, shaped by the ancient wounds of the Sith Empire and the silent echoes of betrayal. The holocron pulses faintly, as if reminding those who listen that knowledge is a double blade, and those who seek it too deeply may be consumed by its edge. As the chapter closes, the voice fades into silence, leaving only the weight of memory and the faintest trace of a name carried on the wind-driven. The Jedi who listened too closely, whose story is etched in shadow and light, waiting to be fulfilled. Chapter 6, The Mask of War, the Shadow of Mercy. The voice exhales slowly, a breath drawn from the depths of a galaxy consumed by fire and shadow. It speaks from the darkness between stars, from the forgotten corners where light dares not linger. Here begins the tale of a mask not merely of metal or design, but of soul and shadow. The mask of war, and beneath it, the flickering, haunted shadow of mercy. Revan's footsteps echoed through the corridors of power and ruin, a figure both feared and revered. The Mandalorian wars had forged him into a weapon, tempered in the blood of countless battles, yet his heart remained an enigma. For beneath the mask of darkness, beneath the guise of a warlord, lay a restless spirit torn by the weight of mercy and the cruelty demanded by war. The holocron whispers of the first time Revan donned the mask not as a simple act, but as a ritual of transformation. The mask, forged from ancient Sith designs, cold and unyielding, concealed his face but revealed his intent. It became a symbol of authority, of terror, of the fine line between salvation and damnation. In war, a mask shields the soul from pain. It hides weakness from the eyes of friend and foe alike. The Mandalorians, fierce and unrelenting, swept through the outer rim like a crimson storm. Planets burned beneath their siege, and the cries of the fallen echoed across desolate battlefields. The Republic, fractured and hesitant, watched as its outer worlds were ravaged, unwilling or unable to act. Revan stepped into this breach, rallying armies not with the promise of peace, but with the steel of vengeance. Yet even as Revan led his forces with ruthless efficiency, the voice notes the mercies he granted moments of grace amidst the carnage. There were worlds spared the final blow, prisoners given a chance to surrender, and soldiers shielded from unnecessary slaughter. These flickers of mercy were shadows cast beneath the overwhelming light of war, ephemeral and easily forgotten, but essential to the man beneath the mask. The holocron recounts the devastating battle of Malachor V, where the war reached its climax. It was a world broken by war, its surface shattered by ancient superweapons, long forgotten by the galaxy. Revan unleashed a weapon of terrible power, a mass shadow generator that cast a pall of darkness across the planet, snuffing out life. In an instant, the battle was a massacre. The holocron sighs, and the Force itself screamed in anguish. Yet, even in this act of destruction, the shadow of mercy lingered. Revan sought to end the war swiftly, to save what remained of the galaxy from further ruin. His actions, brutal and unforgiving, were born from a desire to protect what he loved, even if that protection demanded the sacrifice of many. But the mask of war was not without its cost. Each act of mercy weighed heavily upon Revan's soul, a burden that deepened the fractures within. His closest companion, Malak, watched with growing suspicion and resentment, seeing mercy as weakness. The bond between them, once forged in brotherhood, began to crack beneath the strain of differing paths. The voice speaks now of the slow unraveling of loyalty and trust, of the seeds of betrayal sown in silence. Revan's war became not only a battle against the Mandalorians, but a struggle within his own heart. And among those who followed him, the mask he wore concealed not only his face, but the growing darkness that threatened to consume him. The pauses to recount ancient Sith rituals performed during this time, ceremonies to bind the soul to the dark side, to sharpen the edge of power through pain and sacrifice. These rites, whispered in shadow, deepened Revan's connection to the darkness, even as his mercy sought to temper its influence. And so the war continued, a dance of fire and shadow, mercy and destruction. Planets burned, armies clashed, and the galaxy held its breath, teetering on the edge of oblivion. The mask of war became a symbol of both hope and dread, a visage that haunted the dreams of friend and foe alike. As the chapter closes, the voice slows to a whisper, carrying a warning. Wrapped in prophecy, the mask that protects the soul can also imprison it. The shadow of mercy may soften the heart, but it also exposes it to fracture and fall. Revan stands at a crossroads, his path uncertain, his fate entwined with forces beyond his understanding. The war rages on, and beneath the mask, the shadow deepens. Chapter 7. The throne beyond the rim. The holocron flickers to life, its crimson glow spilling across the dark chamber like the blood of a dying star. Its voice is low and heavy, a whisper etched with the weight of centuries. And then he went beyond. The words echo, and the galaxy as we know it fades. Revan's war was over, or so the galaxy believed. The Mandalorians lay broken, their crusade shattered. The Republic celebrated. The Jedi Council sighed in relief. And yet Revan could not rest. Victory had not brought peace. It had only sharpened the silence, and within that silence, he heard something, a call that was not a call, a hunger that was not hunger. The Rim had secrets. The Rim always had secrets. But beyond it, beyond the stars, known and charted, beyond the maps that hung in Jedi archives, there was something greater, something waiting. And so Revan went where no Jedi had gone willingly before, beyond the edge, beyond the light, into the dark that had no name. The Ebon Hawk drifted like a lone ember through the void, stars falling away until there were none. No hyperspace lanes, no beacons, no safety, only black oceans and distant fires that whispered. Revan stood in the cockpit, silent as the void itself. His mask lay on the console, staring back at him like a question he had not yet answered. Beside him, the astromech chirped nervously, and the navicomputer spat warnings. This was madness. It was death. It was inevitable, because Revan had learnt something during the Mandalorian Wars, something the Council refused to see. The Mandalorians were not the true enemy. They were a test, a storm sent to break the weak. And behind them, behind their hunger for war, there was another will, a shadow that tugged at their strings. He had seen glimpses in their archives, fragments in their war chants, whispers in the Force like cold fingers around his mind. All pointed to the same truth. The war was never theirs alone. The navicomputer screamed as reality tore. The Ebon Hawk shuddered, plunging through a maelstrom of broken light. The galaxy's edge was behind him now, ahead, the unknown. And then, like a beast emerging from the mist, it appeared. A world of black seas and shattered spires. A world that bled the dark side into the very air. And above, Iton Armada. Ships of impossible design, forged from iron and shadow, bristling with power beyond anything the Republic could dream of. They moved like predators, silent, patient, watching him Zio. Cinti had read the name once in a fragment, buried deep in Jedi vaults. An ancient world, older than Korriban, older than the Sith the galaxy thought it knew. It was not dead, as the archives claimed. It lived. It ruled, and it was waiting for him. The landing was not his choice. His ship was seized by invisible talons of the Force, dragged down into black storms. Lightning split the sky, and the land rose like jagged teeth. The citadel stood at the world's heart, a mountain carved into a throne. Its gates yawned wide, and within, darkness gathered. He walked alone, his cloak heavy with rain, his lightsabers at his sides. The air was thick, every breath like drinking poison. Statues watched him, carved from obsidian, their eyes hollow and endless. The Force here was not a river. It was an ocean, and it wanted him drowned. And then he felt it, a presence vast, cold, eternal. The doors closed behind him like the ceiling of a tomb. Shadows writhed across the floor, taking form, taking voice. "You have come far," said the darkness. It was not sound. It was a thought pressed into his skull like a blade. Revan dropped to one knee, not in submission, but in acknowledgement of power. "You are the shadow behind the war," he said. The figure emerged from the dark, a man, and yet not. Robes like flowing night, a face pale as bone, eyes burning with a light that devoured light itself. the Emperor, the true master of the Sith, not the fractured cults the Republic had fought, not the pretenders on Korriban. This was the source. The Mandalorians were your hounds, Revan said, voice like steel. The Emperor smiled, and the galaxy seemed to shudder. They were a diversion, he whispered, a flame to draw moths, and you, Jedi, burned so beautifully. Revan's hands twitched toward his sabers, but the Force crushed him like a fist of iron. He fell, choking on shadows. His will raged, but rage was a candle in a storm. You seek truth, the Emperor said, circling him like a serpent. Then hear it. The galaxy is mine to shape. The Republic, the Jedi, the Sith, they are dust. I am the only truth. I am forever. And then pain, pain beyond fire, beyond death. They broke him piece by piece. They tore at his mind, unmaking him, remaking him. Days, years, time lost meaning. His name was a wound, his memories a storm, and when he rose at last, he was no longer Jedi, no longer servant of the Council or savior of the Republic. He was something else, something forged in shadow and bound in blood. Darth Revan was born. The holocron shudders in its cradle, its light flickering as if afraid. What returns is no longer Jedi, it whispers, and his shadow stretches across the stars. The galaxy would never be the same. Chapter 8. The second fall of the Jedi. The holocron hums louder now, its glow like molten fire. The voice that speaks is neither Jedi nor Sith. It is older, colder, and steeped in memory. And then the galaxy burned again. The stars remember the first fall, the day when Jedi became soldiers, when the code bent and then broke under the weight of war. But this fall, this was different. This was deliberate. This was hunger unmasked. Revan returned not as savior, not as Jedi, but as something far greater and far more terrible. He came not with the banners of the Republic, but with fleets of fire. His mask gleamed like a promise of death. Beside him walked Darth Malak, once friend, now apprentice, adoring, brutal, loyal in the way only ambition allows. Together they ignited the Jedi Civil War. It began with whispers. Outer Rim worlds, weary of the Republic's weakness, swore allegiance to Revan. He promised security, order, strength in the shadow of chaos. His fleet swept like storms, claiming shipyards, breaking supply lines, turning Republic admirals into servants with a single choice: serve or burn. The Republic tried to resist. The Senate argued, pleaded, delayed. And while they debated, Revan moved. He knew their weaknesses. He had been their champion once. He knew their every flaw, every vulnerability. One by one, worlds fell. Tellus Sirocco, Cathos' ashes were still warm when Revan's forces scorched another planet. The galaxy bent like metal in a forge. And with every conquest, Revan grew stronger, not just in fleets and soldiers, but in faith. To his followers, he was more than a man. He was destiny, given form, but he was not alone. Malak, the loyal blade, the friend who had followed him into war, into exile, into darkness. Malak commanded with fire and iron. Where Revan was strategy, Malak was fury. His voice roared through the stars, demanding submission, offering salvation laced with death. Together, they forged a new Sith Empire, not of shadows and whispers, but of warships and armies. No longer hiding in tombs on Korriban, the Sith strode into the light and set it ablaze, and the Jedi bled. They tried to resist, They tried to recall their lost brethren. They tried to heal the wound they had allowed to form when they turned away from Revan's warnings. But it was too late. The order fractured. Masters argued. Knights doubted. Padawans deserted. The council, blind in its silence, clung to hope as if hope could hold back fire. They whispered of patience, of balance, of the will of the Force while their temples turned to Ashdod. The Force itself groaned. The wound that had begun with Mandalore's fall deepened, splitting like a scar across creation. And then the Enclave burned. Dantwan, the heart of Jedi teaching for 1,000 years, was shattered. Its halls, once filled with whispers of wisdom, rang with screams. Its archives bled knowledge into the dirt. Statues fell. Masters died with blades in their hands and disbelief in their eyes. Revan did not strike the final blow himself. He didn't need to. His disciples did. Jedi who had abandoned the code, who had traded robes for armor, who had followed him into war and now into shadow. Corruption spread like fire in dry grass. Some fell for power, others for survival, many because they believed, because Revan spoke not just to their fear, but to their dreams. The dream of order, of strength, of a galaxy without weakness. And for those who refused, there was only death. World after world watched their skies turn crimson. Star destroyers blotted out suns. Cities burned like offerings to gods of war. The Republic staggered, broken, bleeding, and still. The Council did nothing. They hid. They whispered of plans, of hopes, of some miracle. But there was no miracle. Only fire. Only the endless march of Revan's fleets. The holocron's voice lowers, trembling like a dying star. And the Force does not forgive. It had warned them before. It had sent visions, omens, cries through the currents of time. They did not listen. They had let Revan walk beyond the edge. They had let him return in darkness. And now they paid the price. The galaxy burned. But betrayal is the destiny of Sith. The holocron flickers, its light dimming for an instant, as if in dread of what comes next. For no throne stands forever, and no master keeps his blade. Chapter 9, Nights that Forget. Wounds that speak the holocrons, light stutters, trembling like a candle in a storm. Its voice is different, now lower, slower, as if weighed down by the memory of betrayal. And then the blade turned inward. The Sith were never united. Power binds them only as long as fear does. And fear is a fragile chain. Revan ruled as Dark Lord, and Malak served as his sword. They had shattered the Jedi, broken the Republic, set the stars ablaze. Together they had forged an empire from fire and will. But in the heart of every Sith burns ambition, and ambition is patient poison. Malak watched his master rise, watched him bend the galaxy to his will, watched legions whisper Revan's name as if it were a prayer. And in Malak's heart, something festered. Why kneel when he could command? Why serve when the throne stood empty for the bold? The betrayal came in fire, a trap sprung at the edge of battle. Republic fleets, once prey, now bait. Revan's flagship hung above the smoking carcass of a dying world, its hull still wet with the blood of victory. He stood in the command chamber, his mask catching the firelight from below. When the sky split with rage, Malak struck. The blast tore through durasteel like paper. Turbo lasers screamed. Fire blossomed in the void like dying suns. Revan's flagship buckled, its decks folding in on themselves. Bodies spun into the abyss. The bridge became an inferno of glass and flame. Revan was thrown against the console, his mask cracking. His breath ripped from him in a storm of burning air. Malik's voice thundered through the cums, deep and cruel. "You taught me well, my master, but the galaxy has no room for too dark." Lords. Then silence, broken only by screams as the ship fell apart around him. Pain, not like before, not the slow, suffocating corruption of the Emperor. This was sharp, sudden, merciless. His body shattered, his mind worse. The memories, the purpose, the will that had carried him beyond the rim splintered like glass beneath a hammer, somewhere in that ruin. The Jedi came, they did not find a Dark Lord. They found a ghost, a body barely alive, drifting on a dead ship. A man with no name, no past, no mask, no throne. The Jedi saw a chance, not mercy strategy. They feared what Revan had been. They feared what he could become again. And so they took his broken mind and broke it further, piece by piece, memory by memory. They stripped him of Revan, and when nothing remained but hollow silence, they built something new. A hero. They told him his name. They told him his duty. They told him he was Jedi. He awoke in white halls, light, stabbing his eyes like blades, voices whispering of destiny. They gave him robes, a saber, a war to fight. But the wound within him did not close. He walked among the Jedi as one of them, but his reflection was a stranger. He meditated, but the silence mocked him, and at night dreams, fragments like shards of obsidian in the flesh of his mind. Faces without names, stars burning, screams drowned in static, and a mask broken, whispering from the dark. Remember, he could not, and yet something within him reached for the shadow of who he was. Every battle tugged at the thread. Every choice, every flicker of anger, every whisper of the Force pulling him toward paths he did not understand. The Jedi thought they had remade him. They thought they had caged the storm. They had only taught it to sleep. The holocron quivers, its voice breaking like glass in a quake. And so the past began to bleed forward, one drop at a time. Revan the man, the legend, the wound was not gone. He was waiting, and the galaxy, blind to what stirred in its veins, staggered toward another war. Chapter 10. The Ghost and the Galaxy's Grave. The holocron glows, faintly now, its light rippling like a dying star in a cold void. When it speaks, its tone carries both awe and sorrow, as if the memory it recalls weighs heavy even on stone and crystal. He was a ghost, and yet the galaxy bled because of him. He awoke with no name, no past, no throne of fire behind him, no mask before his eyes. The Jedi called him by the name they had chosen to give back. Revan, a sound that meant nothing and yet everything. They told him he had once been a knight, a hero who had fallen and now sought redemption. They told him of a war raging still, a war that needed him. And though the shadows in his mind screamed of lies, he had no choice but to wear the name they offered. The Republic clung to survival, bleeding from 1,000 wounds. Darth Malik, his former brother, his apprentice, his betrayer, now ruled the Sith with a fist of iron and a mouth full of fire. Star systems burned in Malik's name, Jedi fell like leaves in a storm, and hope was a dying ember. So Revan walked the galaxy once more, though not as a Dark Lord, nor as a savior, but as something in between. A hollow man in borrowed robes, a warrior with a lightsaber that sang of memories his mind could not reach. And yet, something stirred in him as he fought. Every planet he touched bled whispers. Every battlefield echoed with ghosts of his own making. Faces haunted him, soldiers who saluted with eyes full of trust, only to die by his command. Friends who had laughed at campfires, now corpses in forgotten mud. And behind it all, one face, burned brighter than the rest Moloch's, twisted with hate and betrayal. Fragments clawed their way up from the depths. A smell of burning metal. A voice shouting orders through fire. A mask that was his, and yet not his. Dreams became visions. Visions became chains, pulling him backward, step by step, into the abyss he had once embraced. And still he hunted. For Malek, for answers. For the truth the Jedi dared not speak. Each world was a grave of the past. Therese, its skies blackened by Sith bombardment, where the screams of the dying still clung to the ruins. Kashyyyk, whose forests whispered secrets of choices made in blood. Manon, calm seas hiding wars beneath the waves. Everywhere he went, the Force murmured, like a wound that could not heal. Remember that his path became a circle, closing in on the heart of his own sins, and with every step, Revan reclaimed a piece of himself, not the name the Jedi gave him, but the truth that bled from old scars. He was not just a man seeking redemption. He was the architect of this nightmare, the war that tore the Republic apart, the Sith fleets blotting out suns. The chaos that feasted on an entire generation, all of it was his. Malak had not begun this fire. Revan had lit the first spark, and so the hunter became the haunted. Yet fate, that cruel and patient hand, offered him no mercy. For beyond the fury of the war, beyond the treachery of Malak, beyond even the shadow of his own choices, something stirred, an echo from the unknown. Regions, he felt it in dreams first. Cold winds that carried voices in languages older than stars. Eyes burning like suns across a black sea. A throne that was not stone, but hunger given shape. And with each whisper, his memories sharpened. He remembered Ziost, the Emperor, the will that bent Mandalorians to its leash. The chains that bound him in a darkness deeper than death. The true Sith, they were not myth. They were not dust on old scrolls. They lived. They waited. They watched through the cracks of the galaxy like wolves in tall grass, hungering for the day the Republic and the Jedi would be too broken to resist. And the day was coming. Malak fell. It ended where it had too on the Starforge, that monstrous relic of infinite war, drinking starlight to birth fleets without end. Revan carved a path through fire and steel, through legions forged of his own sin, until apprentice met master in a storm of blades. They fought not as strangers, but as brothers, whose love had rotted into hate. Every strike was a memory, every clash an accusation. Malak's laughter was thunder, his rage a hurricane. You taught me strength, Malak roared, his saber screaming through the dark. And now I teach you loss. But Revan was no longer the man. He had been neither the savior of the Republic, nor the Sith who crowned himself Lord. He was something else, something forged in ruin, tempered in fire, sharpened by pain. When the blade fell, it was mercy. Malak's last breath was not a curse, but a question. Was this ever about the galaxy, or just us? The Forge died. With him, the Republic hailed Revan as a hero. The Jedi whispered of redemption, of prophecy fulfilled. But they did not see the truth. The wound in the Force still bled. The true Sith still watched. And Revan remembered. Not all, but enough. Enough to know the war was not over. Enough to know the real enemy still waited beyond the rim, patient as death. And so, when the cheering faded and the banners fell, he walked away, not into peace, not into rest, into the dark. The holocron's glow dims, as if in grief. Its voice is soft now, like wind through broken glass. He hunted his own shadow and found an abyss. He won the war and lost himself again. For what stirred beyond the edge was older than Sith, older than Jedi, older than hope. Chapter 11. The silence that devours the holocron is dim now, its crimson glow sinking into shadow like the last ember of a dying fire. When its voice returns, it does not speak with anger, it speaks with dread. And then he was gone. Revan had defeated Malak. The Star Forge lay in ruins, its fire extinguished, its forges silent. The galaxy cheered, desperate to believe the nightmare was over. They called him Savior. They whispered redemption like a prayer. But Revan knew the truth. The war he ended was only a shadow of what was coming. The true Sith Empire beyond the rim, ancient and patient, still waited. He had seen them in fragments of memory, in whispers that clawed their way through dreams. He remembered their hunger. He remembered the Emperor's voice, and he knew this peace was a lie, so he left. No farewell, no explanation, no banners, no monuments, no glory, only silence. He vanished into the unknown regions, the same abyss that had claimed him before, the same darkness that had broken him and remade him once already. This time he went not as a slave, but as a hunter. The ebon hawk slipped beyond the edge of starlight once more. No never computer held the route. No star charts marked the way. Beyond lay only black oceans and the whispers of dead gods. And there, in that endless dark, the silence waited. It began as echoes, faint as breath on glass. Memories that were not memories, voices that were not voices. Then the dreams, endless halls of obsidian, stretching into forever. Shadows kneeling before a throne of hunger, and on that throne him, the Emperor, not a man, not even a Sith, as the galaxy understood the word. He was something else, something older than the Republic, older than the Jedi, older than hope. His presence was a gravity well in the Force, pulling all light into its maw. Revan reached him, at last, or thought he did. A citadel of black stone, its spires clawing at a blood-red sky. Gates taller than mountains. Doors that opened not with hinges, but with screams. Inside, silence. The kind that devours sound. The kind that devours thought. And then, the voice. You return, it said not aloud, but inside his mind, each word. A blade of ice. Revan's breath misted in air that was not cold. His hand tightened on his saber. I did not come to kneel, he said. The Emperor's laughter was not sound. It was pressure, crushing the marrow in his bones. You came to serve. You just do not know it yet. And then the darkness closed in. It struck. Like a tide of knives, cutting through flesh, through thought, through memory. Revan fought force crashing against force, blades clashing in a storm of red and violet light. But it was like striking the sea. Every blow sank into endless depth. Every defense shattered under weight older than time. Pain tore through him, but worse than the pain was the invasion. His mind ripped open like rotten cloth. His will, his strength, his defiant soul dragged screaming into the abyss. He felt chains coil around his soul, not of iron, but of thought. He felt himself split name, purpose, Identity fractured into shards. He screamed, and the sound never left his throat. The battle ended without death. Death would have been mercy. The Emperor did not kill him. He bound him. They placed him in a stasis prison, deep within a vault of shadows, where time itself seemed to curl and die. His body was sustained, his mind shackled, his soul gnawed by whispers that never ceased. Years passed, decades, he could not count. His thoughts became echoes, and even the echoes began to fade. Sometimes he remembered a name. Revan, it felt like a lie. Sometimes he remembered a mask, a war, a face twisted in betrayal. But then the whispers came, smothering memory under waves of endless night. "You are mine," the Emperor said, again and again, until the words were no longer words, but truth. The galaxy moved on. Jedi rose and fell. Empires burned and were rebuilt. The Republic staggered under its own rot. And through it all, the true Sith Emperor waited, silent and patient, his will stretching like roots through the cracks of creation. The holocron flickers, its glow faltering as if the memory itself devours light. The Force grew darker. It whispers. The galaxy did not see, could not see. For what he faced was not a man, not a Sith, not even a god as mortals understand gods. It was hunger, and hunger does not die. The holocron trembles, now hairline, fractures crawling across its surface like veins of blood. Its voice drops to a hush, a confession carved in dread. The Emperor does not die. He waits, and somewhere in the abyss, a man once called Revan hangs between life and death, whispering a promise to the void: "I will break you, or I will burn with you." But no one hears him, not yet. Chapter 12. A galaxy held hostage by ghosts is cracked now. Crimson light leaks through fractures like blood through wounds, its hum rising into a tremor as though the memory it carries strains against being spoken. And as he slept, the galaxy began to bleed. The Emperor was patient. His victory did not roar. It whispered. It spread like frost, slow and silent, creeping through cracks no one saw until the ice broke the stone. Revan lay entombed, neither dead nor alive, chained in thought and flesh. His mind was a battlefield where voices clashed like blades, his will fraying thread by thread. The Emperor fed on him not for power, but for knowledge, for secrets of the Republic, of the Jedi, of war itself. And while the galaxy believed the darkness was gone, while it sang songs of peace and buried its dead beneath broken skies, the true war began. Shadows moved through the Republic like ghosts. Sith who had sworn fealty to the Emperor centuries before now stirred, their numbers multiplying in silence. They did not march in legions. They whispered in courts. They sat in Senate halls with masks of civility, their hands twisting strings. No one could see. Jedi vanished. Some quietly, in the night. Others violently, their blood painting temple floors. Padawans disappeared from their beds. Masters left behind robes folded with care, as if stepping out for a moment never to return. At first, the council called it coincidence, then tragedy, then rumor. But truth crawled in, eventually like rot. Something hunted them, something organized. Assassins with blades that drank the light, shadows in black that struck and vanished like smoke. Sith who were not Sith as the Order understood no lords screaming conquest from thrones, no armies, no banners, only knives in the dark and whispers that killed faith. The Republic, blind as ever, clung to the illusion of stability. corruption, gnawed at its heart like worms in fruit. Senators sold votes for spice and credits, while their worlds drowned in poverty. Admirals siphoned fleets to private warlords. Governors plotted secession behind walls of silk. The people, weary of war, turned inward. They saw no Sith, only hunger. No darkness, only famine and plague. They stopped believing in heroes. They stopped believing in the Jedi and the Jedi-O. How the Jedi bled in silence. They were weak, not in power, but in spirit. The Mandalorian wars had broken their pride. The Jedi civil war shattered their trust. Revan's shadows still lingered, poisoning every council meeting, every whispered debate. Could the Order endure? Could it even matter? Masters spoke of balance, of waiting, of healing. But the Force told a different story. It screamed, it howled. Its currents writhed like wounded serpents. And yet they meditated, deaf to the storm, blind to the wound festering at the galaxy's heart. And through it all, the Emperor waited, his hands stretched across light years, fingers curling around the galaxy's throat, squeezing slowly, savoring each gasp. He whispered to the ambitious. He promised power to the desperate. He spoke in dreams to those too weak to resist. The Sith Empire rose, again not with banners and drums, but like a tide swelling in the dark. Hidden shipyards birthed fleets in secret. Worlds long thought dead pulsed with life, their skies blackened with war machines. Armies of Sith warriors trained in shadows, their eyes burning with hate older than history. Ancient weapons woke, engines of slaughter forgotten since the time of Zeost, stirred in vaults deep beneath black soil. And in the heart of this silent storm, the Emperor fed, not on blood, not on flesh, on fear, on hope strangled before it could bloom, on the death of faith, the ruin of trust. Children vanished, entire bloodlines erased in a single night. Whispers spread of experiments in the dark Jedi children twisted into abominations, their screams echoing through the Force like shattered glass. The holocron shivers now, cracks spreading like spiderwebs as its voice quakes. The galaxy slept, beneath a sky of bleeding dreams. It did not see the noose tighten. It did not hear the silence that devoured stars. It did not know that a god of death had placed his hand upon its throat, and far away, deep in a prison of thought and void, a man who had once been savior, tyrant, and ghost stirred against chains that could not break. His voice was a whisper in a sea of screams, a promise carved into stone. I will return, but even he did not know if the words were truth, or just the last lie he could tell himself. Chapter 13. The Cold War of Flame and Ice. The holocron's glow flickers like the last ember of a dying forge. Cracks spread across its surface, veins of light leaking from wounds too deep to mend. When it speaks, the sound is like steel drawn slowly from a scabbard. There was peace, but peace was a lie. The Treaty of Coruscant ended the war, or so the galaxy believed. Worlds scarred by centuries of fire exhaled in relief. The Senate proclaimed victory with trembling voices, their words hollow against the ruin around them. The Jedi whispered of balance restored, though their temples were half in ash, and their order bled from 1,000 unseen cuts. But the Sith did not fall. The Sith Empire stood strong beyond the outer rim, its fleets gleaming like knives in the dark. Its armies numbered in legions, its war machines slept in shadowed vaults, its lords sharpened ambition against one another, like blades on stone. The treaty was not peace. It was pause, a fragile truce etched in blood and lies, signed beneath a burning sky. Both sides swore restraint, even as their hands clenched daggers behind their backs. The Republic limped, hollowed by corruption, strangled by politics. Senators bartered systems for favors, selling justice like spice in shadowed corridors. Admirals hid fleets in secret hangars, stockpiling for the war they knew would come. The people prayed for order, but found only famine and fear, and the Jedi faltered. Their temples rang with silence. Their numbers, once thousands strong, now dwindled to hundreds. Every name on their rolls a reminder of the dead. They trained new generations, but each Padawan carried the weight of ghosts they could not name. Masters preached patience, but patience curdled into paralysis. Visions came like knives in the night, dreams torn by shadows too vast to fight. The Force was not calm. It seethed, a wound that would not heal in the dark. Sith Lords thrived. They duelled not only with blades, but with whispers, spinning webs of treachery as intricate as any lightsaber form. Alliances were born in blood and broken in silence. Some lords dreamed of open war. Others sought dominion in secrecy, their ambitions coiling like serpents in the dark. Among them rose one whose name burned like a storm. Darth Malgus. He was no schemer cloaked in silk and whispers. Malgus was iron and fire given flesh, a blade too sharp for peace to hold. His voice was war. His creed was strength. He saw the treaty for what it was, chain forged by cowards, and he vowed to break it. While diplomats sipped wine in marble halls, Malgus trained armies in shadow. While senators debated clauses, his forges bled iron. And when the day came, he would strike with a fury that would burn the treaty from the memory of stars. But even as the galaxy simmered on the edge of fire, a colder war wove its threads. Assassins moved like whispers between worlds. Jedi vanished in the night, their sabers clutched by dead hands in alleys no light touched. Informants traded secrets for lives, their bodies washing up in rivers of rust. Espionage replaced armies, silence replaced banners, and through it all, the holocron whispers, Mandalorians plotted in the shadows. Broken but unbowed, the clans stirred once more. Their pride had been shattered in the fires of Revan's war, their ranks broken by the Sith's chains. But Mandalorians do not die. They wait. They sharpen their blades and their hate. Some pledged themselves as mercenaries to Sith gold. Others swore vengeance upon both empires, dreaming of a war that would set the stars aflame in their name. And yet, beneath all these layers of intrigue and blood, something deeper moved. Something colder. Whispers of Revan's name lingered in the dark. His followers, those who believed in his creed of strength through unity, of a galaxy reforged, did not vanish with his body. They hid, they plotted, they wove a faith from fragments, a gospel of war preached in shadows. They called themselves Revanites. To them, Revan was no traitor, no tyrant, no savior. He was truth, and truth does not die. The holocron pulses now, its voice tightening like a noose. Time was running thin. The treaty was ink on water. The war never ended, only learned to whisper, and somewhere in the abyss, a man once broken stirs in his cage of silence, while the galaxy above teeters between flame and ice. The question is not if it will burn again. The question is when. Chapter 14. The Revanite heresy. The holocron quakes now. its fractures glowing like molten veins. Its voice is no longer steady, it vibrates like a blade drawn too tight against stone. And then faith became a weapon. Revan was gone. The galaxy had long believed him, dead hero to some, tyrant to others, ghost to all. But the truth had never been so simple. His body lay imprisoned in a tomb of silence, his mind shackled to the will of the Emperor. Yet his name lived. It began as whispers in the dark, prayers murmured when no Jedi ears could hear, fragments of a creed, torn from memories and myths, sewn together with desperation. At first, they were only seekers, exiles, soldiers, wanderers who had fought in the Mandalorian Wars and the Jedi Civil War. Men and women who remembered Revan not as monster or martyr, but as something greater, a visionary. They asked the questions. No one dared to speak. Why had Revan turned against the Jedi? Why had he waged war against the Republic he once bled to save? The Council called it pride. The Republic called it treason. But the Revanites, they named themselves after him, saw a different truth. Revan had seen what they could not. The true Sith, the darkness beyond the rim, the silent empire sharpening its claws in the void. To the Revanites his wars had never been conquest for its own sake. They had been preparation forged to temper the galaxy for the storm to come. The Jedi had been blind, the Republic weak. So Revan had acted, and for that they worshipped him. At first, it was faith spoken in whispers. Then it became scripture etched into stone. Temples rose in secret, hidden in ruins where no light fell. Masks carved from obsidian hung upon altars, each one a prayer, each one a promise. The Revanites did not kneel to Jedi or Sith. They rejected the false dichotomy of light and dark. To them, the Force was not two halves, but a single truth, the truth Revan had embraced. Balance through strength, unity through war. He was right. They preached in shadowed halls. The Jedi were wrong. The Sith were wrong. Only Revan saw the path. Only Revan knew the price. And then whispers became blades. The Revanites turned from prayer to action. They infiltrated both sides, Jedi enclaves and Sith temples alike, wearing masks of loyalty while sowing seeds of doubt. They stole artifacts, assassinated rivals, turned Padawans into zealots and apprentices into believers. The war between Republic and Empire simmered, but beneath it, a heresy spread like fire under ice. Jedi began to question, why cling to an order that failed again and again? Why serve a Republic that rotted from within? Sith began to wonder, why chain themselves to masters drunk on their own power? Why fight for empires doomed to die? The Revanites offered answers, purpose, destiny, a creed that promised meaning in a galaxy where hope had bled dry. The Force fractured, the holocron whispers, its light dimming like a dying sun, and truth became a lie remembered too well. They spoke of prophecy, of Revan's return not as a man, but as an idea incarnate. They believed he would rise again to finish what he began, to unite the galaxy, not under Jedi or Sith, but under his will. Warriors took his name as oath. Generals carved his mask into their armor. Acolytes branded his sigil into their flesh. They moved in shadows, striking with precision, dismantling both orders piece by piece. The Jedi called it corruption. The Sith called it treason. Both were wrong. It was faith sharpened into a blade, and in the deepest dark, chained and broken, Revan stirred. He felt them like whispers through a sea of screams. Their devotion bled into the Force, a tether pulling him toward memory. He did not know their names, he did not know their faces, but he knew their hunger for him. The Emperor felt it too. He laughed a sound that split minds like glass. For faith is a double-edged blade, and even devotion can become a dagger in the hand of the patient. The holocron cracks wider, light spilling like blood as its voice trembles, and so war birthed heresy, and heresy birthed war. The galaxy thought, the treaty held, the galaxy thought peace endured. The galaxy was wrong. Chapter 15, Death Cannot Hold. Revanth holocron flickers violently now, fractures crawling across its surface like veins of fire. Each pulse of light feels like a heartbeat struggling to continue. When it speaks, its voice is not a whisper, but a shudder. And then, even death became a lie. Revan died, or so the galaxy believed. His body shattered by chains of darkness. His mind broken on the anvil of eternity. His war was done, his voice silenced, his story ended. But death could not hold him. The force itself fractured as he fell, splitting like glass under the weight of his will. His spirit did not drift into the quiet beyond. It tore, it screamed, it clung to existence with claws of rage and hope. Light and dark pulled him in both directions. Jedi and Sith, savior and tyrant, lover and betrayer, every face, every memory, every choice ripped apart and scattered like ash in a storm. And from that storm, two shadows were born, one of light, clinging to the ideals he once held, one of darkness, burning with the hunger he could never kill. Two halves of the same soul, bound by hate and love for what they had been. The galaxy did not know, it could not see. But the wound in the force deepened. It bled with every whisper, every echo, every fragment of Revan that refused to die, and those who believed in him felt it. His followers, the Revanites, spoke his name not as memory but as prophecy. They said death was not the end only, the door. They said Revan walked beyond it and returned in a way. They were right, for in places where shadows pooled deepest, his presence stirred. A flicker of thought on a battlefield, a whisper in the mind of a dreaming Sith, a phantom hand guiding the saber of a Jedi who had lost his faith. Not fully alive, not wholly Gonan, echo, relentless as the tide. Sometimes he was mercy, sometimes he was wrath, sometimes he was both and neither, but always he was Revan. The holocron's glow pulses, cracks deepening, as if the memory itself is too heavy to contain. Its voice trembles with something almost like fear. The ancient Sith laughed, it says, words dripping like venom, for they knew the truth. Death was never the end, only the door. Revan's ghost did not haunt like others. It did not linger in halls of stone, chained to relics and regrets. It walked through the Force itself, threading paths between stars, seeking something. Perhaps redemption, perhaps vengeance, perhaps only the answer to the question that had broken him from the beginning. Was he savior or destroyer? The echoes did not agree. The light half sought to heal, to guide, to mend the wound it had made. The dark half hungered to finish what he began, to tear down empires and forge a new order from fire and steel. And so even in death, Revan was war. The holocron quivers, its voice sinking to a whisper like the last breath of a dying god, and the galaxy would bleed for it again. Chapter 16. The Emperor of Emptiness. The holocron is almost broken now. Its shell glows like a dying star, cracks spilling raw light into the void. The voice that emerges is strained, stretched thin by the weight of memory. The Emperor was no longer a man. He was hunger given form. The Sith Emperor had worn many faces, but all were masks, all lies. For what lived behind them was something older, something vast, something that no name could hold. When the galaxy thought him defeated, when Jedi and Sith alike whispered that he was gone, the truth was this: he had only shed a shell, and what emerged was not a shadow, but an emptiness so deep the Force recoiled from it. He called himself Valkorian, but names meant nothing now. He had become something else, immortal, eternal, unbound by flesh. A god of death walking among mortals. Worlds burned for his hunger. Entire civilizations withered beneath his will. He did not simply conquer, he consumed. Cities turned to bone-white dust beneath skies that bled ash. Oceans boiled away into steam. Mountains cracked and sank into molten rivers. Each planet was a banquet. Its life drained until only silence remained, and with every death he grew stronger. Jedi and Sith fell alike before him, for what blade could cut a shadow? What saber could wound the void? Masters who had fought in 100 wars trembled like children in his presence. Lords who had slaughtered worlds knelt in terror. Their ambitions burned away like paper in a storm. Those who served him believed they were chosen. In truth, they were only vessels, meat and bone filled with his will. Puppets dancing on strings woven of darkness. He did not rule as men rule. He devoured time itself. Empires rose and crumbled at his whim, and still he endured, patient as the grave. He wore faces like garments: Sith, Emperor, Eternal Father, Savior, Tyrant, God. But the core remained the same, hunger without end. He became a god of death. The holocron whispers, voice cracking like shattered glass, and even the Force screamed. The Jedi fought, the Sith plotted, both broke against him. For what they faced was not a man who could bleed, not a tyrant who could fall, but a void that learned, that fed, that waited. Every prophecy fractured, every vision burned away. The currents of the Force twisted into storms no seer could navigate. It recoiled from him, like flesh from flame, and yet could not escape. And in the midst of this rising tide of emptiness, the galaxy shuddered, for another shadow was stirring, an infant's cry in a desert, a boy born not by flesh, but by the will of the Forsaw, perhaps by its defilement. A child forged his answer, or his weapon. His name would be Anakin Skywalker, but that story was still a breath away. Lingering at the edge of eternity, the holocron flares now, its fractures glowing like suns, its voice trembling with a dread it can barely contain. The galaxy was already dying when he was born, and somewhere beyond time the Emperor waits, not in silence, but in hunger. Always hunger. Chapter 17. The birth of the chosen wound. The holocron is breaking. Cracks burn like molten rivers across its surface, each fracture bleeding crimson light into the void. Its voice trembles now, like a dying wind through hollow stone. And then the Force screamed. A slave boy, a virgin birth. A prophecy whispered. In shadows, on the dust-choked world of Tatooine, beneath twin suns that scorched the bones of the land, a child drew his first breath. His mother said he had no father. His blood said he was more than flesh. Midichlorians swarmed in numbers that defied nature, as if the Force itself had bent its law to create him. They named him Anakin Skywalker. To the galaxy, he was nothing, a slave among millions. To the Jedi, He was a question that tasted of fear. To the Force, he was a wound that would not close. The holocron whispers like a serpent now. The Force created him. Or was it the Sith? The Jedi believed he was the chosen one, a weapon of destiny, born to bring balance. They wrapped him in prophecy like chains of silk, never seeing the cracks beneath. They told themselves the Force willed this, that he was light given flesh, but the truth was darker. The Force did not sing in joy at his birth, it screamed, for he was not merely a child. He was the answer to a war older than empires, older than stars, the wound left by Revan's fall, by the emperors, hunger, by centuries of death and betrayal. Anakin was the scar made flesh. Was he gift or curse, redemption or ruin? Even the Force did not know, but the Sith wondered. Did their emperor create him? Did his hunger reach through time to twist the currents, birthing a child who would serve his will? Or was this the galaxy's last defense, a blade forged in desperation to strike at the god of death? The answer was lost in shadow, but the question haunted everything. The Jedi, blind in their towers of marble and pride, thought they could shape him, thought they could tame the storm by whispering calm. They did not see the fire they fed with every word, every command, every chain of doctrine they wrapped around his soul. Anakin Skywalker rises, the holocron intones, its voice breaking like glass, unknowingly bound to Revan's legacy, to the Emperor's hunger, to the dying scream of the Force. For the same darkness that had called to Revan whispered now to him. The same wound that split the galaxy bled still, and its blood stained the boy's hands before he even knew their weight. And once again, the Jedi did not understand what they had touched. They did not hear the echo of Zeost in his heartbeat. They did not taste the ashes of Nathema in his breath. They did not see Revan's shadow falling across his path, stretching long and black toward a destiny carved in pain. They called him Savior. They called him Hope. But the holocron knows better. Hope is a lie that tastes sweet before it kills you. The boy would grow. He would learn. He would burn. And when he burned, the galaxy would burn with him. Chapter 18. The Fall of Skywalker. The rise of Vader the Holocron is a heartbeat away from shattering. Its glow bleeds through the cracks in violent pulses, its hum trembling like a scream trapped in crystal. The voice that emerges is jagged, torn between grief and fury. And then, the chosen one fell. Anakin Skywalker, the boy of prophecy, the slave who dreamed of freedom, became a Jedi. He wielded the blade of light. He fought in wars that scorched the stars. He wore the robes of guardians and spoke the words of peace even as his heart beat, like a war drum. But prophecy is a cruel master. The Jedi called him Hope, but they never trusted him. They feared his fire even as they sought its warmth. They bound him in laws that strangled him. They spoke of serenity to a boy made of storms. Then war came, the holocron whispers, voice like cracking stone. The clone wars erupted, drowning the galaxy in fire and steel. Armies of droids clashed with legions of clones across shattered worlds. Jedi became generals, their sabers flashing not in defense, but in conquest. They told themselves it was for peace. They told themselves they had no choice. Anakin was their greatest weapon. He won victories where others bled defeat. His name became legend, his face a symbol carved into the hearts of soldiers. But inside, the wound widened. Every battle deepened the fracture in his soul. Every death sharpened the fear that haunted him, that everyone he loved would be taken, and he would be powerless to stop it. Fear turned to anger, anger to obsession, and the darkness whispered, not with roars, not with chains, with promises. Promises sweet as honey and cold as the grave. Promises that no one would die if he only reached a little further, if he only grasped the power waiting in shadow. Then the temple burned. The holocron's voice shakes now, like a cry muffled beneath stone. Anakin Skywalker fell. He became Darth Vader. The man who swore to save life became its executioner. The boy who dreamed of freedom became the galaxy's chains. He marched upon the Jedi Temple, blade blazing like a midnight sun. He cut through masters who had once called him brother, through Padawans who had once looked at him with trust. His saber hummed like a requiem as young voices screamed and died in marble halls. The temple burned, its spires clawing at a sky blackened by smoke and betrayal. Statues of heroes toppled into rivers of blood. Holocrons shattered, lights dimmed. Hope died, and the galaxy watched as its chosen one became death. He repeated, Revan's path but without redemption. Where Revan sought to save the galaxy through order, Vader sought only to bind it in chains. Where Revan questioned, Vader obeyed. Where Revan's soul was torn between light and dark, Vader drowned in shadow and never looked back. His soul was carved in pain. The holocron whispers, its voice almost breaking, and all the stars trembled. But even the darkest fire flickers in wind. Somewhere, buried beneath black armor and burning hate, a spark endured. A whisper of the boy who had loved, the man who had sworn to protect, the child who had dreamed of the stars. That spark would matter someday, but for now the galaxy lay in chains. Chapter 19. The Son, the Father, the End. The holocron is almost gone. Its light flickers like the last breath of a dying star, its shell a lattice of glowing fractures. The voice that emerges now is not calm, not steady. It trembles with the weight of an ending, and then the circle closed. Luke Skywalker, a farm. Boy on a forgotten world. A name that meant nothing in the endless sprawl of stars. Yet destiny does not need a throne to crown its kings. He was born of the same blood as the monster who burned the galaxy. Born of Anakin Skywalker, the chosen one who had become the blade of the Sith. Born to finish what prophecy began, Luke rose in the shadow of an empire that had strangled the stars. He carried no banners, no titles only, a hope so fragile it should have broken beneath the weight of reality. But hope, like fire, thrives in darkness. Luke confronts Vader. The holocron whispers, its voice raw and strained. Father and son, divided by war, bound by blood, met in halls of steel and shadow. One cloaked in black armor, the other in faith that light could endure. One with hands of iron, the other with hands that still trembled. They fought not just with sabers of crimson and emerald, but with words that cut deeper than blades. Vader struck with fury, but Luke struck with love. Every clash of steel was a cry, I will not let you go. And for a moment, the darkness faltered. The Emperor, yes, for even gods can wear masks, sat upon his throne of obsidian, laughter curling like smoke from his tongue. He promised Luke power, whispered the same poison that had bled into Anakin's soul. He sought to bind the son as he had bound the father. The Emperor dies, the holocron says, cracks glowing brighter, as if the memory itself burns. Love cut through shadow. A choice unmade for decades was made in a single heartbeat. Anakin Skywalker, the name buried beneath the armor, beneath the rage broke his chains. For his son, he turned. For his son, He killed a god. The Emperor fell screaming into the abyss, his laughter shattering into fire and silence. The prophecy was fulfilled. The Chosen One destroyed the Sith. Balance returned, or so the galaxy believed. But the holocron knows the truth. The wound in the Force still bleeds. It whispers, voice trembling like a dying storm. Revan's echo stirs. The Sith are never truly gone. Luke watched his father die not as Vader, but as Anakin. He saw the man behind the mask, the broken soul clawing toward light at the end. He believed redemption was the final word. But in the deepest dark, far beyond the reach of suns, whispers endured. Shadows gathered like wolves around a dying fire. The Sith were not dead. They had never been dead. They were patience. They were hunger. They were the shadow that breathes, even when the light blinds itself, and the holocron begins to close. Chapter 20. The shadow that still breathes the holocron is dying. Its light fractures into shards, spilling across the void like blood on broken glass. Its hum is a death rattle, each note a cry of warning too old to stop what comes. And still it waits. The galaxy celebrated. The Emperor was dead. The Sith destroyed. Balance restored. Or so the story was told. But darkness is patient. Darkness does not die with men or empires. It learns. It waits. It hides in bloodlines, in memory, in myth. Darkness is patient. The holocron whispers, its voice fraying like old silk. It breathes even when no one hears. The Sith were not ended. They were only delayed. Their creed was not a code written in stone. It was hunger carved into the marrow of history. Empires rise and fall. Orders burn and rebuild. But hunger endures. It lingered in the ashes of Ziost, in the silent grave of Nathema, in the shattered halls of Coruscant, where Jedi statues lay broken, and the marble still whispered of blood. It clung to names like ghosts, Revan, Malak, Vitiate, Vader, each a flame that thought itself eternal, each a shadow that thought itself unique. And yet all were threads in the same endless weave, the tapestry of hunger stretching from the first scream to the last breath. The holocron's voice shakes now, barely more than a breath. Revan was not the end. Vader was not the end. The Sith Empire was never destroyed, only sleeping. Far beneath the ruins of wars, too old to name, something stirs. Not in fire, but in whispers. Whispers crawling through bloodlines, slipping into dreams, coiling like smoke through the cracks of forgotten tombs. A new creed, older than memory, shapes itself from dust and silence. New faces will wear old masks. New voices will speak old lies. They will call it truth. They will call it destiny. And once again, the sky will bleed. The Jedi will rise and fall. The Sith will rise and fall. Empires will burn, and the Force will fracture again and again until the stars themselves are cold. Because the shadow never dies. It breathes. It waits. It hungers. The holocron begins to collapse now, its shell splintering into shards of molten light. Its last whisper crawls through the void like a serpent, coiling tight around your throat. And far beneath the ashes, something begins to whisper again. The light dies, and the darkness inhales.